Hello.
Hello, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm Ed Morrissey. You're live on the Ed Morrissey Show at hotair.com.
Hi, Ed. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. Very thrilled to be speaking with you about For Greater Glory. I have been fortunate enough to see the rough cut of this film maybe about a month ago or so.
Uh-huh.
And fascinating movie. I think it is an extraordinarily well done movie. Even the rough cut version, I think, is an extraordinarily well done movie. Tell us a little bit about how you got interested in doing a movie about the Cristero War, something that most of us probably have no knowledge about whatsoever.
And I'm on that team also. I had no clue, no prior knowledge of the Cristiada or the Cristero Wars in Mexico in the 20s. When I was presented the script, I read about it, obviously briefly, Googled it, as they say.
Right.
Then I read the script, and I was very fascinated by it. First of all, the quality of the material and the ambitiousness of the nature of the project, and the fact that it reeked of all these sort of classic genre of old Hollywood, sort of the John Ford movies or Lawrence of Arabia, or even more recently, a movie like Braveheart,
Yes.
And so I was very enthusiastic about it. I met the director, and we started talking about it. I saw some research books that he had about it, and images which were breathtaking, took your breath away. The violence and that existed in that time, and the people fighting for this cause. And I began to ask friends of mine, Mexican American colleagues of mine, and even Mexicans from Mexico about the Cristiada or the Cristero Wars or the Cristeros, and they didn't know anything about it. And I'm going, well, this is very curious. This just happened in 1926, and it lasted for a number of years, and a lot of people died, and it was like, whoa, what's this all about? And so that was obviously very curious, to kind of understand a little bit, the taboo nature of this war, and so I got involved in it. I was very stimulated and honored to portray this historical character who's General Enrique Gorostieta.
General Gorostieta is a complicated character in the film. In real life, he's a complicated character. This is a person who probably philosophically was more aligned with the government position than with the Cristero position. And in your performance in this film, again, I'm working off the rough cut. I'm not sure what it comes across.
It's probably fairly similar to what you saw.
I'm sure it's going to be very similar to what I saw. This is you do a wonderful job in portraying the nuances, the struggle that this person had, that Gorostieta had, trying to figure out whether or not he actually belonged at the head of the.
Well, the research that I read, and specifically in a book by Jean Meyer, French historian, who did a big, very in-depth book on the Cristiada with images, and there were chapters on Gorostieta, or a chapter on him. It was labeled as someone who was atheist or non-believer per se, and also even when he got involved, even though he believed in the concept of what they were fighting for, he believed in the concept of religious freedom, the concept of absolute freedom, and he was not really, as far as I could understand, he was not really a fan of the current government and of President Calles. Even though he fought for them in the Mexican Revolution and was very decorated, he was not a big fan of the current government, as far as I could tell. And his he gets involved in this process, because he gets recruited by the League for the Defense of Religion, which is a pacifist group, and also knowing that there are these guerrilla movements that have risen up to combat and fight for their religious freedom. So he's hired basically to organize this army, and obviously I think there's also an element of the general wanting to get back in the saddle again,
right,
because he's running a soap factory, Yeah,
that was actually really amusing.
Yeah, but he did have a cynicism, even while he was a general. They speak in the research that I did that he was cynical towards the Cristeros. He was, about saying, these people who believe in this, but slowly, he had an appreciation and a respect for them, and we posed the idea that he had also a spiritual catharsis in the process.
And of course, he ended up giving his life because he was.
Yes, he gave his life for it. And recently, actually, it was very interesting. The granddaughter sent me a letter after seeing the movie that was very touching, and and how finally the name of her grandfather was, finally the credit was given to him, because obviously when you try to forget that this happened and you sweep it under the rug, well, the people who fought in it are also swept under the rug too.
Right.
So the Gorostierra legacy was, not accounted for, and she showed me a quote from a letter that he wrote home to his wife, saying that he knew that there's always the great possibility that they will never see each other again, but that he knows now for sure that the Gorostierra name will live positively in the history of our family. Something to that effect was the quote, and I thought that was very moving.
And it's taken decades, really, for the story to be told.
For that to come to light, for the whole story, not only his story, but the whole story.
The whole story, yeah. I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, if I remember correctly, that some of the people that were involved were beatified by the Catholic Church, including the young boy who's portrayed, very movingly portrayed in this, Jose Sanchez.
The Jose in the story.
Jose in the story is Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio, who is beatified, I believe, by Pope Benedict.
Yes.
And it's a heartbreaking portrayal. It's just an absolutely heartbreaking portrayal in this movie.
There's 3 characters in the story that were all beatified by Pope Benedict, and the Anacleto Flores character and Father Nobles, I believe, also in there, who gets killed early on.
Yes, and so these are the names that you wanted to bring up, which brings me to a question, because I find it interesting. You brought up the Braveheart connection. I thought the same thing when I saw the film. That was one of the first things I thought. Is like, this is a Braveheart type of film. And Braveheart was interesting in a number of ways, because it was a film that was really about, a historical character that people really hadn't. It was a story that hadn't been told on the big screen, at least. And
right.
A lot of people weren't aware of who William Wallace was. But the story got told at, I don't know if it was coincidentally or if it was, fortuitously, but at a time when the politics of Scotland were sort of in flux and moving towards the idea of being more separate from Great Britain, or specifically England. Now, this film had to be in process for a couple of years, but just as you guys are putting together the rough cut, this thing erupts in the United States about the HHS mandate and the dispute over what constitutes religious expression and what doesn't. Did you find that interesting? And
also apparently very active in even Mexican politics right now. Also the sort of the relationship between the church and the state and the government, and how much involvement should it have, or how much power should someone have in government? How much power should religion have? All that stuff. It is going on all around the world. It wasn't planned, but it is an interesting coincidence, and one has to be mindful that these kind of people are struggling for basic human rights all around the world. Not only religious rights.
Right.
So it is. I mean, I come from a country that those rights were taken away from the citizens in the country of Cuba by the Castro regime,
right?
And they're still struggling to regain those rights, and so it's an ongoing struggle. We live in a society here that we have the great ability to speak our mind without repercussions, and criticize and organize, and we fought, this country fought for us to have these rights. We must cherish them and preserve them.
I completely agree. Now, this film opens on June 1st. It's a month from today. It's going to open up.
It opened in Mexico already, with interesting enough, it broke apparently records. People
that's interesting
showed up in droves to see the movie, and a story that was taboo and nobody wants to talk about. Now they're talking about it now, which is great. Well,
that's a power that films and art can have, is to open up those stories. And I mean, these are, that better than almost all of us would. You've been involved in in some great movies in the past, and including the Arturo Sandoval story, which is For Love or Country, I believe I have that right.
Exactly.
And about the same type of thing that you were talking about in Cuba.
Yeah, about artistic freedom, really.
Yes.
I mean, but also just basic freedoms. And that movie also, again, had a thematic that was similar. In terms of the fight, there wasn't a war, but it was a personal war. A personal fight.
Yep. And what is the one thing that you want people to take from For Greater Glory when this movie comes out here in the United States?
Well, you make a movie, you value, you approach a script or the potential of a film on an artistic level, as a filmmaker and as an actor, and how is the construction of this movie, the people involved, how does it weigh in on, my sensibilities as an actor and as a filmmaker, and it's just the kind of movie that you want to be associated with. And this movie, to me, from the beginning, sort of reeked of those classic movies that you would see, a director like John Ford make, or David Lean, and Lawrence of Arabia, like
right.
Those epic classic Hollywood films. So I saw that its potential, and I think we've achieved that in the film, which is I'm very proud of.
It's a gorgeous film.
You want any movie you do to have resonance in the individual, so when you walk away from it, you're thinking about it for days or hopefully weeks or years to come. That's what you get from it. It's not propaganda, so I'm not asking them to feel one way or another. I'm just hoping that they feel and it provokes thought, and people, admire it as a film, and as a story that's beautifully told and movingly told. That's what I aspire to.
Well, speaking for myself, that is exactly what I took away from this film. I was very moved by it. And I thought the performances, the story, it's really the whole package, and I think it's going to get a tremendous reception when it comes out here in the United States.
Thank you very much for that.
Really
we appreciate your support.
Well, we're going to be talking more about this in the weeks to come, and definitely we'll be talking more about this. I'm hoping to get an interview with one of the producers down the road. We're already working on that, so we're going to keep talking about this. I'm sure that'll be
made available. I'll mention it to the powers would be here that are with us today in this promotional effort. Well,
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I know you're a busy man, but I want to thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Andy Garcia, star of For Greater Glory, the true story of Cristiada. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.